that the NIH contracts with these pharmaceutical companies in the development of vaccines. We've even found out that some employees, government employees, benefit financially from this. So how do you change that to make sure that there's no conflict of interest?
I really don't think it's him making money personally. I think it's this. It's one size fits all, and his idea that the regular people aren't smart enough to make these decisions, so he just wants to treat everybody the same. So once again, because he's an elitist and he thinks we can't handle the truth. In private, he said in emails in last spring that most of the masks you can get over the counter don't work because the virus particles are too small and go right through them. That's still true. They don't work. There's no value. And yet we're mandating them by law because, and this is where I really have the disagreement with Fauci. One thing about the mask, when he said they didn't work at all, was he didn't want people buying the N95 masks and people in the hospital, the doctors not having enough. So he just admits that he lied, but it was a lie for our own good, supposedly.
And he's admitting it in congressional testimony. Roger Stone, they raided his house in a pre-dawn raid by the FBI, this elderly gentleman, for supposedly lying before Congress. Yet the standard doesn't seem to be the same for Dr. Fauci, and it's affecting millions of Americans' lives.
It's a double standard, but also the problem is that journalism on the left and in the center is completely ignoring this. You know, what they said for a year was that it was a conspiracy theory and that you weren't even worthy of public debate. You should be canceled. You should be eliminated. They should kick you off of Facebook, kick you off of Twitter if you were insinuating that it might have come from the lab in Wuhan.
I know, I had that happen. I had that happen.
And haven't we all? But
Censored,
that's something we've got to push back on. And, you know, we don't need a country where we live where there's a ministry of truth, and the truth is defined by people like Dr. Fauci. The other big thing about the cover-up, and I think there probably was a cover-up with Wuhan, is that the people that were appointed to investigate it were the people who gave them money. So who would be culpable? Who would be the most guilty, at least guilty in the sense of, you know, attaching some blame for this virus? It'd be the people in the U.S. who funded it. That would be Dr. Fauci and this Dr. Daszak with EcoHealth. So those are the people two most culpable, because in the chain of money that's going to Wuhan, who did they appoint? This Peter Daszak ended up being appointed to investigate himself.
But even our own intelligence community, and that's where I wanted to get to next, we now know that on February 3rd, 2020, there was a meeting with the intelligence community to talk about the origins of the virus. Who did they bring in to question? Dr. Fauci, Dr. Ralph Baric, who's also part of the gain of function research, and Peter Daszak of EcoHealth Alliance. So how can we trust this new 90-day investigation?
One of the email changes between this Peter Daszak of EcoHealth, Ralph Baric, and they're saying we need to get people to sign a letter saying we shouldn't, you know, that there was no lab leak. We need to get all this organized, but maybe we shouldn't sign it so it looks as if this were an independent effort. That to me sounds like a cover-up. But I think really if you want an honest investigation, Dr. Fauci should be excluded because of conflict of interest. I think because he's been unwise, naive, and in all likelihood has been lying to us, he shouldn't be in part of government, but he certainly shouldn't be part of the investigation. If you want to have an open and thorough investigation, it can include Peter Daszak or Dr. Fauci.
So, final question I have to ask you, because it does seem that Biden's back is being pushed against the wall a little bit in responding to this. Do you think he will hold China accountable after a 90-day investigation if it shows that it's a lab leak? And how important is it that we do hold them accountable?
I think very important. And, you know, we've started one thing. I passed an amendment on the most recent bill saying no more U.S. taxpayer dollars should go to the lab there, no more money for gain of function in China. I think we need to broaden that. I think we need to question whether we should be funding gain of function, making super viruses in the United States as well. That's a first step.
Are we still doing that?
Yes, in our country. It's supposed to go through a special committee, but Dr. Fauci and others provide exemptions to all of these people, and they have their hands in it. And remember this, Dr. Fauci has said for years publicly that gain of function research is worth it. Even if there were a pandemic, he would say it was worth it. So he was acknowledging as early as 2012 that a pandemic could occur from this research. It may well have had, but this is the naivete and the terrible judgment. He still thinks that it's worth it. But as we work through that, I think it's incredibly important that we look at whether we should be doing this in our country as well.